So we got some really good news. The Supreme Court ruled against Donald Trump in a groundbreakingly important Supreme Court decision. It's a big f***ing deal. They, not only that, but they ruled unanimously against Donald Trump. They haven't had a unanimous decision in like 30 years or something like that. It is always split down party lines practically every single time. So the fact that they got a unanimous one's a big deal. Let's listen to Kyle Kulinski talk about it here.
All right, guys, we got some great news. So the Supreme Court just ruled unanimously 9-0 that Kilmar Abrego Garcia has to be released.
This is a guy that was sent by mistake. The administration said they sent him there by mistake to El Salvador. And by the way, El Salvador is a slave camp. It's a literal concentration camp in every sense of the word, or in every sense of the term. You know, what do you think when you think concentration camp? You think they were using people for slave labor and they were killing some of them. That's what's happening at this camp. Seriously. I cannot overstate how important it is that people understand how bad El Salvador's concentration camp is. And they sent this dude there for nothing. For nothing. He did nothing. Anyway, the Supreme Court said that they must facilitate his return. There's some updates, so we're not just going to listen to this. We're going to talk about the decision and some other stuff. By the way, the algorithm is hitting me hard right now, completely ignoring me. So I'd appreciate if you watched to the end of the video. Having increased watch time as a percentage and a raw number is what pushes the video further. Also check out my books, owenmorgan.com. All right, back to the video.
This is a guy who they admitted, the DOJ admitted, yeah, it was kind of an error that we sent this guy. He was totally innocent of any wrongdoing. You had the president accuse him of being a gang member. The VP accused him of being a gang member. There's zero evidence for any of that. Like I said, they admitted in court, actually, oh, yeah, it turns out he didn't do anything wrong. So this is a huge...
Dude is completely innocent of any wrongdoing, and they sent him to a literal concentration camp. This is the exact that happened in Germany, seriously.
Huge deal. That 9-0 unanimously, they're saying you have to facilitate his return. So they still try to do the thing where they, like, in their language, they split the difference and try to be, like, moderate on it. But even with trying to be moderate, they had to come to the right conclusion because it's so painfully obvious.
It's egregious
That this guy was sent incorrectly and this wildly violates the law. So
right.
Go ahead.
Right. And so let me just talk about it for a second. So here's the thing. There are so many different checks on power in the United States, right? Like every branch of government has a check on every other branch. And Donald Trump has just trampled all over every check on power, just completely ignored it. The Supreme Court is the last check on power, pretty much, that Trump has not flagrantly ignored or eliminated. So the question now is Donald Trump going to ignore this court order, thus completely eliminating the last check on his power? And here is his response.
Of the border, have you talked to Attorney General Pam Bondi recently about the cases going on with the deportations?
Yeah, sure. It's really sad when you think that Biden allowed millions of people to come in, and if they find one now...
But this isn't about Biden. What are you talking about?
I will tell you, the one, somebody said he's a member of MS-13, not Tren de Aragua. He's a member of MS-13, and therefore he should immediately be brought back. Well,
That's not true. He's not a gang member. He's completely innocent.
MS-13 is just as bad as Tren de Aragua. So they say, oh, we made a mistake because he's not with them. He's with MS-13.
That wasn't the mistake. The Trump administration admitted to a mistake, and the mistake was they didn't mean to send him there. He got pushed up in his timeline or whatever because some people were removed from the flight log. I don't remember exactly what it was because they went somewhere else. And so they had a big list of people that was next in line, and he just got pushed onto the list, even though he was completely innocent. He was just some dude that didn't have a criminal record, nothing. He's going through the legal immigration process in the United States. And they sent him there. And the administration admitted, we made a mistake by sending him there. In court, they admitted that. The reason they admitted it at the time in court was because if they didn't say we made a mistake by sending him there, then they would have had to tell the truth about it, which is they're indiscriminately sending people there. So they say, oops, rather than we don't give a shit what you think. So anyway, by admitting that they sent him there by mistake, it allowed the Supreme Court to take on this perfect case for this situation. And they ruled against Trump here and said they must facilitate his return.
Bring him back. Bring him back. MS-13 is a very bad group.
So now Donald Trump is trying to spin it. Instead of saying we made a mistake by sending him there, he's saying we made a mistake. He's a different kind of gang member. That's just not true. It's a lie.
I have great respect for him. I know him. I've known him for a long time.
Wait, who are we talking about?
Respect for him. I know him. Very bad group. I have great respect for him. I know.
For who? I don't know who the hell he's talking about.
I know him. I've known him for a long time. He's a young leader, and he's very tough on crime. Very, very tough on crime.
Dude, did we just get completely, I don't know what happened. Are we in a different subject all of a sudden, just seemingly out of nowhere? Anyway, Pam Bondi replies to this situation too. Check this out.
We asked him 2 questions.
Well, first of all, it was an administrative error as to why he was deported. And he is a known gang member.
No, he's not. That's a lie.
Testified he was a gang member. And
Oh, ICE testified. ICE testified to that. I feel so much better knowing that ICE testified. Because we can trust ICE completely, right?
administrative error as to why he was deported. And he is a known gang member. ICE testified he was a gang member, and we believe he should stay where he is. You know, the defense had argued that he was, a journeyman, that he was training to be an electrician. Well, the last gang member we arrested, who was
He wasn't a gang member.
a violent murderer, was also hanging wallpaper in a place called the Villages in Florida, one of the biggest retirement places in our country.
She's equivocating. She's trying to conflate what some other random dude who she doesn't even name is doing, or what he's up to, or his bad qualities. She's trying to link his bad qualities with this random guy that didn't do anything to anybody, completely innocent of any wrongdoing. This could be you. This could be me. I am next in the line of fire as a media figure that's critical of Donald Trump. This could be any of us next. We need to call it out now while we have the chance, in my opinion.
So these people are living among us. One of the big cases we had, I think you're very aware of, half an hour from where we're standing, was another violent gang member living right among us in a very, very nice residential neighborhood.
So she's just going to talk about gang members now instead of talking about the fact that they sent the wrong guy to a literal concentration camp. Just horrific. Empty, soulless, evil human being. All of them. There is seemingly nothing good in these people. Like, I don't know who raised them or if they've ever been diagnosed with sociopathy or what, but this is... Anyway, the reason we're talking about it in the first place is because the Supreme Court said this dude needs to come back now. Here's another little trick that Pam Bondi tried. She said, the Supreme Court said we have to facilitate his return, not effectuate his return. I.e., we have to make it easy for him to return if Bukele chooses to return him. But we have no obligation to effectuate it. We have no obligation to, try to get him back. We're just going to say, if he wants to return him, then we'll send a plane. That's Pam Bondi's interpretation of the Supreme Court. That is effectively completely ignoring it. Luckily, the Supreme Court can come back and say, you're so full of... You have to follow our instructions, and I believe that they will. This is the guy, Ali Abbas Ahmadi. The U.S. Supreme Court's ruled unanimously that the Trump administration must try to release a Maryland man who was mistakenly deported to a mega jail in El Salvador. Call it what it is, a concentration camp. Some people speculate that he might be dead. He might have died on day one, for all they know. And now the Trump administration has to lie and twist it around and pretend they didn't understand English when they were told what they're supposed to do. Because if they actually try to follow the court order, then everybody's going to find out that it's a concentration camp that kills people to a death camp, which I think we all are already aware of. In a 9-0 ruling, the justices declined to block a lower court's order to facilitate bringing back Kilmar Abrego Garcia, that's his name, but they also said Judge Paula Zinnes may have exceeded her authority. On Friday, Judge Zinnes directed the Trump administration to provide her with daily updates on what steps they were taking to bring Mr. Garcia back to the U.S. Wow, interesting. The government has conceded Mr. Garcia was deported due to an administrative error, though it also alleges he is a member of the MS-13 gang, which his lawyer denied. There's no reason to think that. It's just completely fabricated out of the ether. It's entirely made up. They made it up to justify not bringing him back. They made it up to try to turn public opinion against him. So when they're ready to completely ignore the Supreme Court, they'll have some kind of justification for it. Mr. Garcia, a Salvadoran, is one of dozens of alleged gang member migrants placed by the U.S. on military planes last month and flown to El Salvador's notorious SCOTUS, Terrorism Confinement Center, under an arrangement between the two countries. Interesting, Terrorism Confinement Center. You know, I didn't connect the dots before. Like, Donald Trump declared, like, Mexican cartels terrorist organizations. You guys remember that a while back? It was when he was, day 5 or something. It was super early in the administration. And I was thinking, well, that's not good, but it could be worse, I suppose. Now I'm starting to see why he did that. Because he was laying out the legal framework, the legal justification to send random people to these terrorist black sites that nobody ever comes out of. This is like leading up to World War II. There were a couple of animal treatment laws that were put into place. One basically said you need to put an animal down if it's suffering, and the other said you must give an animal anesthesia if it's if you're going to put it down. And Hitler took those and expanded them out to apply them to more than just animals. Applied it to Jews and, any perceived inferior race, basically. Or inferior people like Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever. It's these little things that you never expect, these little laws that get expanded out into something absolutely psychotic. The Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, issued its decision in an unsigned order on Thursday. The justices did not give the administration a deadline for when Mr. Garcia should be freed. The fact that they agreed with a lower court means they're probably going to have to follow the deadline that the lower court gave, which is daily updates, I would guess. They said Judge Zinnes may have exceeded her authority when she required the Trump administration to effectuate Mr. Garcia's return. Wow. The district's court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs, the Supreme Court order said. You know what? I'm going to take this as a win. This is a win. The Supreme Court decided against Donald Trump that he cannot just send random people to this literal concentration camp because he wants to. You can't do that. Even if you have engaged the Alien Insurrection Act, you can't do that. Anyway, let's listen to just like a little bit more of the secular talk thing.
A couple of things, and then I'll read the order. So first of all, this was the Maryland father. His wife is a U.S. citizen. 3 kids, 2 of them special needs. One of them, 5-year-old, nonverbal autistic, who was with him when he was arrested.
Holy shit, dude.
The only real interaction he'd had with the justice system, he got picked up. He was in a Home Depot parking lot, trying to get day labor or work with a contractor or whatever. And so how this allegation even came up is you had some sketchy confidential informant who claimed he was a gang member in New York, where he doesn't even live.
He'd never been there.
And he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat. And those are the things that they pointed to be
Yeah,
like,
so they thought, oh, it's red, therefore he's in a gang, right?
This is why you need due process right here. This is the reason. Due process is where we go through and establish the facts of the case beyond a shadow of a doubt, or beyond reasonable doubt. Was he in a gang? If you think so, then let's take all of the evidence that ICE collected, quote unquote, and have it reviewed by an objective observer, a judge or a grand jury or whatever. And if they decide that he has a questionable history, then we can take steps from there. That's not what's happening. ICE claims some and as a result, he goes to a literal concentration camp. No hard evidence to back it up, no trail to like follow their line of logic, no nothing.
basically.
Which,
yeah.
by the way, that's that would be the Bloods, and that's not MS-13.
Supposedly there's some sports, I don't know, but that was what they.
Oh, they try to link that to Tren de Aragua or MS-13,
MS-13.
red for some reason.
Yeah, and then the other thing to note is that the lawyers for the Justice Department, who were honest in court and were like, yeah, it was an error. And
again, they weren't honest. It's that they were doing it indiscriminately. They were just sending random people. And instead of saying, we're just sending whoever we want, they came up with an explanation, which is, oops.
And admitted that they didn't have information on how this happened or why that happened. The Trump administration put them on leave, put that lawyer on leave, and their boss for daring to actually be honest in court. So, okay, all of that being said, this is great news. Let me read this order. It's not that long and we can go through all the pieces. So on March 15, 2025, the U.S. removed Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia from the U.S. to El Salvador, where he is currently detained in what they call SCOTUS. The U.S. acknowledges that Abrego Garcia was subject to a withholding order forbidding his removal to El Salvador, and that the removal to El Salvador was therefore illegal because he had a reasonable claim that him and his family had been subject to death threats themselves by gang members in El Salvador. So a judge said, okay, the government cannot deport you to El Salvador, and that's what they're talking about here. The U.S. represents that the removal to El Salvador was the result of a, quote, administrative error. The U.S. alleges, however, that Abrego Garcia has been found to be a member of the gang MS-13, a designated foreign terrorist organization. And
that's why he designated them a terrorist organization, so he could do like this. I mean, gangs are not good, obviously. They facilitate organized crime, and they hurt the people around them and stuff like that. But there's a reason that gangs started in the first place. There's a purpose behind gangs that exist. Some of the earliest U.S. gangs came about because black men were coming home from work and they were having the shit beat out of them by the white police. So they form large groups that shuttled each other to and from work every day to make sure that the police wouldn't bother them. They supported their communities, and as happens with any large organization, especially if that organization is willing to get violent, as gangs were, it broke down into a kind of protection racket. They would break into places to steal, to fund their activities. They started drawing hard lines on maps saying that these groups can't come in, these gangs can't come into our area, and we won't go into theirs. It started as a noble idea and decayed into violence and ugliness. But at its core, gangs still kind of serve the same purpose to, for the most part, depending on the gang, serve their little communities. If you are in a gang, you are protected from certain types of violence and stuff. So there are some areas of the country, of the United States, for better or worse, that are controlled by gangs. They have gang regions, and if you live in this area, then you are somehow affiliated with the gang. Trump just declared entire gangs to be terrorist organizations, which means anybody affiliated anywhere along the line at all is now a terrorist and subject to going to a concentration camp. I mean, are we starting to connect the dots on how dangerous this could get? Are you guys starting to see why this is so bad? I mean, I'm sure most of you already saw this, but for any Trump supporters watching, are you starting to connect the dots on this? Are you starting to see why this could be bad? Which gang is he going to declare a terrorist organization next? Are they bad? Absolutely. Do they control entire areas of cities? Yes. And anybody that's affiliated in any way can now go to a concentration camp. This is setting it up to literally send every black person that he wants to a concentration camp, every Mexican that he wants to a concentration camp.
That his return to the U.S. would pose a threat to the public. Abrego Garcia responds, he is not a member of MS-13 and that he has lived safely in the U.S. with his family for a decade and has never been charged with a crime. True. On Friday, April 4th, the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland entered an order directing the government to facilitate and effectuate the return of Abrego Garcia.
So, I guess the Supreme Court said she might have overstepped by saying effectuate? Okay, that makes absolutely no sense. But they kind of left the door open for Trump to just not do shit, didn't they?
That language is important, so we'll come back to that.
And that's the lower court saying, basically, you got to bring him back, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, so facilitate and effectuate the return to the U.S. by no later than 11:59 p.m., so basically midnight on Monday, April 7th, Monday of this past week.
And they just ignored it completely.
On the morning of April 7th, the U.S. filed this application to vacate the district court's order. So the U.S. government appealed. The Chief Justice entered an administrative stay.
This is John Roberts, I guess?
That was saying, like, okay, you don't have to get him back tonight. We're going to take a look at it. The application is granted in part and denied in part, subject to the direction of this order. Due to the administrative stay issued by the Chief Justice, the deadline that had been imposed by the district court, that is now passed. To that extent, the government's emergency application is effectively granted in part, and the deadline in the challenge order is no longer effective. So we've already blown through the deadline. We put our administrative stay in place, so obviously that deadline no longer applies. The rest of the district court's order remains in effect, but requires clarification on remand. The order properly requires the government to, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. The district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. So they say, you're right, the government has to facilitate, but this term effectuate, you need to clarify to make sure that it is not bumping up against the executive's prerogatives to, conduct foreign policy the way they.
I.e., you need to lay things out and make it easy for him to return. And if Bukele chooses to return him, then be prepared to accept him and do whatever it takes to get him back. But you don't have to go to El Salvador and demand him back. You don't have to try too hard is what this is saying, basically. Better than nothing, I'll take it.
They want to.
Yeah, so the executive has the right to control foreign policy, so you can't say they have to effectuate his return, but they're saying you definitely have to facilitate it.
You gotta try.
You definitely gotta try because this is wildly, wildly illegal.
And this last sentence here, for part, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. The order heretofore entered by the Chief Justice is vacated. So
9-0.
The fact that it's 9-0 is so great.
It gives
freaking Clarence Thomas was like, this is crazy.
Yeah, that's a big fucking deal. That shows me that the Supreme Court is not all in. I was convinced that the Supreme Court is all in for Trump no matter what. No questions asked. Brett Kavanaugh, Clarence Thomas, Alito, those three people, their brains are gone. They're gone. They've been replaced with MAGA. There's nothing left of their original personalities. It's like with my mom. There's no longer like a Jennifer Morgan. It's now Jennifer Morgan, Jehovah's Witness. Everything else has been erased. It's that same exact way with Alito and Clarence Thomas and Kavanaugh. And the fact that they drew a hard line here is wild to me. I can't even believe it. It's really, really good news is the bottom line. And it's something that we should celebrate. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments. Do you think this guy's ever going to see the light of day? Do you think he's already dead? Tell me your thoughts.